go. All right. So really happy to be back for another Heart to Heart. And today I'm going to be speaking with Mangala Holland, feminine empowerment and sexuality coach and an international facilitator of retreats and events. I'm super excited because I feel like I'm saying this a lot lately. I've wanted to speak with Mangala for ages. And I feel a kinship, even though we've never met in person. I feel a sister connection, and I just have seen you from afar and really admired and respected your work and what you're sharing with the world. So super happy, super excited. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted we finally managed to get this lined up, Shakti. It's been a while in the making. So yeah, I'm happy to be here, and hi to everybody. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So this topic, what you bring to the world, what you're sharing, it's such a big one for every woman. I was just, before we press record on this, I was just saying that in my Awakening Shakti course at the moment, we're on the very topic of sexual awakening. And it's a real biggie. So I'd like to ask you, first of all, because I think there can be so many misconceptions when we put those two words together. So what does that mean for you?
Great question. And yeah, for me, I see it as a process of it's not about putting on like a role or a persona or a mask. It's very easy for us as women to look at other women that we think are sexually free and open and seem to be so surrendered, and all this. I hear this from my clients all the time, like, that's what I want to be like, and I'm not like that, and what's wrong with me? And
Yeah.
I think instead it's much more helpful to ask ourselves, like, a lot of the work I do is like stripping away the layers of like, who are you underneath, behind your roles, behind the masks you put on for society, behind the woman you are in relationship, or the mother, the your job profession, all of that. Like, who are you behind all that? What's your authentic, true essence, and how can we tap into that so that you can feel authentic and start to feel the pleasure that's there in your body and is alive all the time, and access that as a current of energy or Shakti, so that you can live a more harmonious life. So I see it's less of a trying on new things, and it's more of a clearing out of what's in the way and helping you get back to what's already there. Remember that true essence. Yeah. So for me, it's very much tied up with empowerment. I see the two as just totally two sides of the same coin. Once we access our sexual energy and start to feel the harmony of that, and we let go of shame and the insecurities and all the stuff that gets in the way, that's where we get to really be confident in the world. So yeah, I do a lot of work on sexual confidence, orgasmic confidence, helping women really find their power within this. And it often looks like not what they expect it's going to look like, and it's not what movies portray it to be, or society, or billboards, or magazines. It's something much more raw and real. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Um, so gosh, there's so many directions I could follow on from that question. I'm like, oh, where do I go next? You mentioned a couple of things there that I just made and I wrote down. You mentioned shame and you mentioned insecurities. I think these are two big things for every woman. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge in itself. And I see this as, we've grown up in this Western patriarchal culture, and from a very early age, we've been taught to be a nice girl, to be quiet, to behave a certain way, to look a certain way, to not cause a fuss, keep everybody happy, and that's something we've ingrained from such an early age. And that means that from a very early age, we've had this a lot of us have internalized this dialogue, and it means that we squash ourselves into, boxes that don't fit us. And also it's very much tied up with the body shame as well. And I think back to I remember when I was growing up, and I remember reading, the girls' magazines of a certain I remember being like 10, 11, and even in magazines aimed at my age range, then there were exercises to have a flat tummy and things like this. And it was like at that age, and it's just, and I mean, that's way before that, Snapchat and all the things that current kids have to deal with. And I just think there's so much there that already from such a young age, we're comparing ourselves to unrealistic expectations of what a female body should be like. And it's that disconnect of, well, I'm not like that, so there must be something wrong with me. And I see this is also very tied up with our relationship to our genitals as well, like how we relate to this part of our body. It's like this is the most deepest intimate area of our whole body. What words do we use to describe that part of our body? Do we have a harmonious relationship? Do we feel like our bodies let us down in some way because of the smell or the look or whatever else it is? There's so many layers to shame in that. And then if you add on things like religion or strict parents and other factors in the mix, and early relationship experiences that might not have been very harmonious, or somebody's told you something about yourself that you've taken on and can't let go of. There's so many layers to shame. It's such a big one. Yeah,
it really is. And what I love in this dialogue that we're having is, people will come to this recording, to this conversation, and I know they'll see the title, and maybe there'll be an expectation that we're going to be talking all about sexual practices and how to have the best orgasm in the world and all that stuff, and we are, but it's not necessarily beginning from the place that people would expect, in that there's this recognition that the experience of deeper orgasmicness, that's not even a word, or juiciness or pleasure or the awakening of your sexual energy, isn't necessarily something that just happens where you kind of go and do a practice and boom, it's happened. It requires this sort of peeling of the layers of these very human aspects that we all hold: our shame, our fears, our insecurities, our relationships, our beliefs, our programming. So it starts in a way with all of that.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's going to come up when you start doing this, if you start doing the internal work and you haven't addressed that stuff, it's gonna come up anyway, and I really don't believe in papering over the cracks with being in a bit of a bypassy, well, let's just focus on pleasure, because that's the deeper healing comes when we start to love and integrate all parts of ourselves. And that means our wounded little girls and our sister wounds, our mother wounds, all of those big things are in the mix anyway. And there is a lot of healing that can come from accessing pleasure. So it's kind of it's a bit of a paradox, but yeah. So I always recommend, I like to frame that up front, because when you start to do this kind of inner work, some women can just be like, well, I'm not getting the juicy orgasmic stuff. I'm bumping up against numbness. I'm finding pain or sensitivity. I'm not enjoying this as much as my friends say they are. So what's wrong with me? And it's not that you're broken and you don't need fixing. It's just there's some stuff that needs to be moved through and unwound in the system.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I really love the grounded way you deliver this, and I'm really on the same page with you about that. And I kind of feel, again, in my own message, that sometimes I've shifted as I've shifted, like my message has evolved, but I'm very clear now, because of my own personal experience, that it's, let's be ready to look at everything, the dark and the light, together. And it's not just about going to a workshop for a day, having a wonderful energy orgasm run through your body, and then that's it. And actually, more and more, I've sort of seen the risks and dangers of that.
And absolutely, and I've done it myself. I've been in some very wacky neo-tantric circles over the years, and been to all the workshops and the retreats where you get blasted open, and it might feel good in the moment because you can feel some energy buzzing, but that can actually be a trauma response. It doesn't mean you're having a profound healing and awakening, and it can lead to a bit of a hangover afterwards, that can show itself quite a bit further down the track. So I believe in going slow, going steady, going gentle, and really honoring your own boundaries. And what I love about kind of the work we're both doing is we're giving women tools to discover this for themselves, so that they're having that agency and sovereignty in this process, and it's not something that's being done to them by somebody else.
Yes.
But you're in your process of your own self-discovery, which means you get to self-regulate and you get to pull back when you feel like you've bumped up against something. And it also means that if something feels good, you can keep going on exactly what's feeling good as well. So I think that's really important.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to again some other words you've used, because again I think this is going to resonate for a lot of women. You mentioned pain, sensitivity, and numbness, and this isn't necessarily just genital, it could be anywhere, the numbness. But can you speak a little bit to your understanding of the body-mind connection, because I guess again people might sort of feel or experience pain somewhere, whether it's in the vulva, in the vagina or elsewhere, or somewhere else in the body, or numbness, and think, oh, that's a problem, I need to fix it. But I guess you would have a different perspective on that.
Yeah, it's just that understanding that everything is so interconnected. And a lot of women I've worked with, they'll come to me because they say, I'm feeling so up in my head, I'm disconnected from my body. There's one client, when she started working with me, she used to say, it's dead down there, it's just dead. And that was the phrase she used. And it kind of makes sense that if you've had some kind of trauma, or you've been in relationships, you've had heartbreak and you're still recovering from that, or you've just had disconnected sex, which pretty much everybody has at some point in their lives, or you've had some boundaries overstepped, that your body creates a survival mechanism. It's like, well, we don't want to feel that pain, so we're just going to switch that off so you don't feel anything. And when I think about it internally, I was the same. I didn't even know there was anything more than a clitoral orgasm till my late 30s, till I started discovering all this stuff. I thought that was the be all and end all. And then when I heard about the cervix and stuff, I was like, wow. And I was completely numb on the cervix and the G-spot for a long time. And I see it as the spectrum. So I see on one end of the spectrum we have numbness, and on the other end we have orgasm. And this is particularly about internal, I'm talking now. So you've got numb, and then as you move through numb, there might be pain, and then we move further over, there's like kind of sensitivity, or just a weird feeling that maybe you've not felt before, and it doesn't quite feel like pleasure, and it doesn't quite feel like pain. And then a bit further over, then you start to get pleasure, and then further over it moves from pleasure into kind of an orgasmic state, or orgasmic sensations, which can be very varied and rich for everybody. So I see that there is this spectrum, and the great thing is we can totally wake things up from numb to pleasure and orgasm, and it takes the going slow, and the listening to your own boundaries and not overriding it, and it takes patience, and it might take time, but it's also very beautiful exploration as well. Yeah.
What about, would you have you ever worked with any clients with vaginismus?
Yeah, and I actually had vaginismus when I was 17, 18, and I had it. Funny enough, it was with my first boyfriend, and we really didn't know what we were doing sexually. I was absolutely not warmed up, and when I look back on it now, it's like I didn't want to be with him. I didn't know that. I couldn't articulate that at the time, and it's like my body just shut up shop and was like, no, not that's not happening. And I remember it being very painful and very challenging. And I have worked with clients with that. I've got one client at the moment who's got some very severe medical stuff going on, and it's expressing itself through her body as I guess you could call it as a long-held trauma response. And she's doing some profound healing now, and we're not I mean, on one hand, yes, we're looking at how to relax things in her vulva and in her vagina, and gently meet that rather than forcing, and really listening to her own boundaries and really getting clear on what that is, like what's a hell yes and what's
Yeah.
not a hell yes. And that's been a game changer. But also we're looking at the rest of her life as well, and it turns out that she's about to end her marriage, because she's making some massive decisions about where she's been out of alignment, and where she's been saying yes to things that aren't her deepest truth. So there's so many layers to that.
So you're
Yeah.
seeing this connection between, a yes and a no in life,
Mm.
a sort of a body shutdown that is mirroring a shutdown or a desired shutdown that's not being honored elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes sense that the most intimate part of us is going to show that, particularly if it's something related to relationship or relationship to self. It's that deep core feminine being. And that's not to say it's black and white and that's always what it might be. There might just be something medical, but often women get pathologized in this way when there's what would be more helpful would be that deeper, that making a more loving connection with the vulva, sending more love, being really slow and patient and just honoring and cherishing, and deeper self-trust can often unwind more than going and trying to do physical internal work. And
Right.
it's kind of a real listening to what needs to unfold there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's your understanding of the power or the significance? Specifically, I'm going to use the word yoni,
Mm.
the womb, vulva, vagina, so kind of encompassing. What's your
Mm.
understanding of that? How do you understand the power that resides in that place within us?
I'm just, as you say that, I just feel like everything just like boom. Here it's just like, yes. This is the core of I feel this is the core of my life's work, is, you know integrating all of that and helping others tap into this. Because on the classical tantra level, like, you can talk about the cosmic yoni, and how the yoni is just like, is um Ma, she is the divine, she's immanent. It's this pure energy that permeates through the whole of existence and the universe, and that primordial, absolute raw power. And what a powerful connection to realize that we have that within our own body. And I would recommend, if any of you watching this haven't read it, to read the book Pussy: A Reclamation, because she talks about that in that book. And she talks about it in a really grounded, no nonsense, way. But and even though I thought I've been studying and teaching this stuff for a long, long time, and I still got a lot out of that book, just the way she phrases it, and it's super accessible. So I love it. I love the fact that I can tune in and allow this to be my guidance system. Like, is she saying yes to this opportunity or that opportunity? Is it a no? Am I being lit up by this? And also just feeling the amount of energy that gets generated there when I'm turned on, for example, or when I'm in an orgasmic state. When I was with my last lover in Australia before I moved over to the UK, um, it was a short relationship, and we're only together for just over a month. But I was having like the most amazing orgasms, and I also had my best financial month of the year. And I know it's a direct correlation. It's like, it's just this being magnetic and being in this, having this overflowing cup, this energy that's just resourcing me and making me feel energized and powerful and just completely in my zone of genius. I feel like, I feel like it's also like anti-aging and replenishing and nourishing. Like it's like this energy just keeps flowing. It's not being discharged. I'm not throwing it off. It's just like I can keep cultivating it, and I can generate it and generate more of it in my system. And that, I think, is super exciting because it's infinite. What I'm discovering is there's no end to this stuff. You don't just hit a point and go, okay, I'm multi-orgasmic. It's like every single session is a new discovery in itself. And sometimes it can be interdimensional and feel more like just a very subtle, profound meditation. And other times it's a more physical thing. It's just, what next? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this because on your website you actually say about how your work impacts life, love, and business, and they're all connected. And just again, reflection. I'm on a course at the moment which is all about doing the business the feminine way, and it's such a revelation for me, I have to say. And you know, here I am teaching embodying the feminine, and like there's bits here and I'm like, oh my god, I hadn't realized the connection. And you know, she's saying, Shari Thompson is the teacher, this facilitator, she's brilliant. One of the things I'm going to be telling you ladies to do is to self-pleasure more, you know, because it's all directly connected, and the energy there. And what was I going to say? So gosh, I've kind of gone off on different things now. Cultivating, you spoke about cultivating, right? So how, for someone who doesn't know, well, how do I cultivate this energy?
Well, for a start, I would like, just in daily life, there's a couple of things you can do, and that's to look at ways you can keep grounding yourself. So being out in nature, getting fresh air, eating grounding food, getting plenty of rest, particularly around your menstruation, so that you're not running yourself ragged, saying no so that you're not just saying yes to everything and everyone, and preserving your own energetic boundaries is also really important. And that's, you know, that's life. It's not just pleasure. And also, and I think what's really important in that is to look at how we can generate more. And it's like we can cultivate this energy ourselves by keeping our awareness down in the lower part of our body, keep making a connection with, whether you call her yoni, vulva, vagina, whatever words you use, keep building this friendship, this relationship with her, so that you get a more intimate dialogue happening. That can be really, really supportive. And then when it comes to self-pleasure, exploring more internally and not just relying on the external peaky clitoral experience. There's much more nourishment and profound experiences available when we start to work with the G-spot and the cervix. It can also be where you might find more numbness, and it might, in fact, it will probably require some unwinding of your old arousal patterns, because most of us go for the default clitoral experience, and for a lot of women that's the only way they've been able to experience orgasm, and often on their own and not with a partner. So exploring more internally, whether you use fingers or a wand, can be really, really supportive.
When you say a wand, what do you mean? Because I've got one of those I can't remember what, made out of plastic wands, not a vibrator. Is that what you mean?
I like to use with a glass wand or crystal. If you're using crystal, I would recommend jade. Some of the other crystals are too porous. So a glass wand is really great because it's neutral. And you can get them made in all different styles that have got curves and things, which are specifically designed for the female body, and they're designed to make you feel good. And some are specifically designed to work on the G-spot, some are designed for the cervix. And it's wonderful because it means you're not having to contort yourself into funny positions, which can get exhausting and feel challenging. And it's a lovely way to be able to work through, and I really encourage, you know, to just explore and be curious rather than hunting for an outcome, because as female bodies, female pleasure isn't a goal-driven linear experience, and it's not a good idea to approach it in that way, because we're setting ourselves up for failure. So the more we can just treat this as a curious experiment, and what am I going to find today, this is going to be really supportive.
I love that. I think that's really important to underscore.
Mm,
It's not goal driven A to B experience.
yeah,
That's kind of the masculine
yeah.
programming. It's like, oh, let's get to orgasm as quickly as
Mm,
possible. I'm going to do this, this, and this, and then I'm going to come, and then it's over. You know, no.
yeah.
Um, so
Mm.
we've talked about oh, so many things already. I'm getting juicy just talking about it. But I want to also ask about the rest of the body.
Mm.
So we've talked about, vulva, vagina, yoni. But what's this thing called a whole body orgasm? How does that work? Do I need to touch my
Mm.
genitals for that to happen?
No, that's it. Like a full body orgasm can just be every cell of your being lit up, and some people can experience this. There's a lot of energy that's moving, and I see some people having, a lot of physical manifestations of that in the body and some shaking, and for others that it can just be super super subtle. I've experienced orgasms in my elbow before and it's not been through any stimulation. So it's really more, I think the more we can just be in our body the whole time and not be up in our heads, that's when we can really widen our concept of what pleasure is and what aliveness is. And this is where things like doing dance and embodiment practices regularly really help us, because then we're not stuck in the disconnect of being just heady all the time, because that's a massive block to pleasure, as is stress. So and actually dance and embodiment and all these beautiful things are lovely ways to release stress and to get rid of that stuff at the end of the day. And I think just having a regular practice is really beneficial when it comes to pleasure and intimacy, because you're not starting from ground zero, and that means then that the energy can flow through all your channels into everywhere in your body, so that it can flow into your heart or flow through your whole body. Like going to, say, ecstatic dance, they don't call it ecstatic for nothing. It's like when we're on the dance floor or anything like this, or even just walking through the park, if we're consciously playing with the energy and just feeling that aliveness in every part of our body and connected to our body, then everything's flowing and we're not separate from our surroundings, and we're not throwing it off. We're not saying no to the experience. It can be incredibly delicious and juicy. Um, yeah,
Yes.
and and that's wonderful. It's so nourishing for our system.
Yeah, totally with you on that. Totally with you. Because of course dance is probably like dance and making love, whether that's
Mhm.
with myself or with another. They're my two greatest joys in life, quite honestly.
Mhm.
I live for dancing, and that for me is a form of making love. It's totally blissful, ecstatic, and for me that's like direct meditation. Goes
Mm.
straight into oneness with
Yeah.
no trouble at all. Everyone's way is different, but yeah. I've got a question about age, Mangala,
Mm.
because I work with clients quite a wide spectrum of ages, up to retirees from sort of mid to late 20s, I guess, and you probably do too.
Mm.
And I know some women will come, and also I want to say I'm now in menopause.
Mhm.
I've been in menopause for, is it 2 years or 3 years? I can't remember. So I've navigated that and come through, and here I am, still feeling very alive and very juicy.
Mm.
But I know for a lot of women, that particular stage is, oh, everything's over, or childbirth, or postpartum. So there are these different stages. So something about age and how this relates to sexual awakening, because I can imagine some women will imagine there's a barrier there. I can't because.
Mhm.
What would
Yeah.
you say?
Yeah, I'm 48 in a couple of weeks, and yeah, I'm in my perimenopause um, phase at the moment, and yeah, I've worked with clients who are way out the other side of menopause. Like somebody in my last group program was in a late 60s, and I've been shown time and time again that if you say yes to the inner work and you don't take on the society's conditioning of what you're expected to, that you're that you've lost it, you've become invisible, whatever the story is, that there's a sacred portal that's there for us to access, and that as we age, we get to know ourselves so much better. We get to really honor ourselves so much better, and we're less likely to be swayed by what other people think and some of the other superficial stuff, and we get much clearer on what's in our best interest and what's not. And I think that can lead to much more wonderful, juicy experiences than we've ever experienced before. It's like we get to ripen, and we get to go into these new phases of our life. Like they talk about, in the Chinese tradition, they talk about menopause as the second spring. I was talking to somebody about this last night, a really wonderful expert in this field, and and I just love this, that we have different roles at different ages of our lives, but as we age, we're always accessing a deeper level of feminine wisdom, and it's coming from within us and coming from our bodies, and it's never too late to access that. Yeah.
Aho.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally on with you on that with you as well. I so feel that, myself. I feel like I'm just getting started. And there's always more.
Yeah.
Like you said, this energy is infinite and almighty, really.
Yeah.
So yeah. Oh gosh, I'm so excited by this conversation. Okay, I'm going to ask you this question. So in my own work, I'm always linking the sexual and the spiritual. I'm always linking this experience of deepening into pleasure, deepening into your sexuality and your awakening in that way as a spiritual experience. For me, they go hand in hand. How is it for you, and what's your experience, what's your framing of it, the spiritual and the sexual?
Yeah, absolutely one and the same. And I've been on a big journey with my spirituality as I have with my sexuality, and a few years ago that was more in the neo-tantra sphere, but it was there was a lot of blurriness for me, and what I had to do was strip away a lot of dogma, because I was getting dogma on the sexuality side and on the spirituality side, and it's like, it should look like this, and particularly in some of the tantric circles, it's like push all the energy up and sublimate all your energy and move it all up, and and a woman should be like this, and this is what it was, just all these labels and dogma, and it was really unhealthy. And as I stepped out of those environments and just went on my own journey of discovery and reclaiming what was true for me, that's where like the profound spiritual stuff really kicked in. And it kicked in through getting in touch with my cycle and being really connected to that, because I found that by not moving energy up all the time and feeling that groundedness, particularly around bleeding, like that heavy, that full womb, that everything coming down, and that it gave me more of a connection to the earth, and feeling this kind of like, which I think is what the planet really needs right now, is there is no separation between our female bodies and Mother Earth. Like, we're one and the same, and the more we can honor our own bodies, then we're going to tread more lightly on the earth. And if men could honor their feminine more and be more in touch with their feelings and everything else, well, maybe we wouldn't be in the mess we're in right now, which is a whole other conversation. But it's like, I find that my most profound spiritual experiences often come when I'm menstruating. Like, some spiritual teachers will say that's when you're most likely to achieve enlightenment or awakening as a woman, and because we're in this more liminal space where the veils are thin, and it's not like you even have to sit and do the mantras and the pujas necessarily. It can also just be the resting and the listening and the beingness. So yeah, and I do have a very strong classical tantra practice as well. I do all the pujas and the rituals and the meditation every day, and that's as well as my embodiment practice. And I don't see a separation between the two. I need both. And my body is also the body of the goddess. And so when I'm honoring my body, I'm honoring the body of the goddess, and she's honoring me, and there's no separation. um, and that's my take on it.
Yeah, again, totally with you. Yeah.
Mm.
um yeah, I was going to ask you actually, and you've just kind of led into that, about your own, you don't have to go into a long story, but obviously there is a backstory to why you're doing this. And how what you've spoken about neo-tantra, and you've spoken about classical tantra. And actually, maybe I'll ask about those first. I think those terms are really useful to have someone like you speak to, and to your experience of that. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. So yeah, classical tantra is more, not necessarily, well, it can be the very scholarly route. It's very this is more the traditional tantra, which is more like the very specific technology that's used. So it's specific mantras, it can be specific rituals, working with specific deities, and it's very much like doing fire ceremonies and other things where it's like you offer this as you say this mantra, and it's at this precise second of whatever, and it's all this very 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 specific steps. Neo tantra has kind of adopted, appropriated, whatever words we want to use, has taken some of the Indian mysticism of the kind of idea of Shiva, Shakti, and perhaps some deity stuff as well. But it's much more about the human body experience, I would say, and the more sexual healing aspect. So that would be more things like yoni massage, lingam massage, more of the self pleasure. That I prefer to use words like sacred sexuality to kind of cover that kind of side of stuff. And I used to call myself a tantra teacher because I had been in this environment for a long, long time that called itself the real tantra. It was like, this is authentic tantra, this is what it is. And as it turned out, it was a cult. And as I spent 5 years in that environment, and once I pulled myself out and deprogrammed myself and uncovered more understanding of what tantra really was, it was like, well, actually no, that's more neo mixed in with a few sprinklings of other bits of weird teachings to mash it all together. Yeah. And yeah, so it's useful to have a distinction, and I would love more people to bring that awareness to, like, it's not saying that one's better than the other, it's different strokes for different folks, but just know what you're actually practicing and call it that, and stand proudly in that. I think is really beneficial to everybody. Yeah, and I came to this because I had corporate burnout. I used to work for stockbrokers and travel all over England, making money for other people and feeling really disconnected from my body and everything else. And I burnt out, and I thought I'd take some time to go and travel, and ended up on this massive purification journey, because I was also DJing back in the day and leading a real wild party lifestyle for a long, long time. And then my body just said, nah, this isn't happening anymore. So I took up yoga and then went on this big journey and realized that at the core of my self-hatred was the sexuality stuff. I needed to heal that, and that's what put me on this path. Yeah, so I've been there. I know what it's like. I know what that side of it's like, and that's why I'm so passionate about giving women tools to empower themselves in this, and not needing to go to some bizarre male guru in the middle of nowhere who's up to all sorts.
Sorry. Yeah. But that's it, again, echoing, resonating. I do what I do from a passion because of my own experience. And everything I bring comes from that lived experience, and the wounding and the shadows and the pain and the agony and the searching. So totally get that. And even though our paths haven't been identical, honoring your path and your journey and your search, your quest, your realizations, and that it never ends either, so really feeling that. What was, you I think you said, did you use the word self-loathing? Did you say self?
Mm, mm.
Can you identify, like, for you, um, like, what have you discovered or what have you uncovered for yourself with the roots of that?
Yeah, it goes back to the shame piece. For me, it was very much the way I was brought up, and in particular, my dad, bless him, lovely human, but he'd been brought up as a Catholic, and he had a lot of baggage still around that got passed on to me as being the firstborn and the daughter and all this stuff, and very, very specific ways of how I should and shouldn't behave, which I fought against tooth and nail. But yeah, there was some very deep internalized conditioning there, uh, with shame, and that it went so deep. And I just feel like I'd always had this lack of self-worth at a very deep core level, very, very deep. And it got impacted more and more as I, went through puberty, and then ended up in disastrous sexual experiences that just compounded things more. I ended up in an abusive relationship at one point, and just, all these things just made it worse and compounded it and compounded it. Um, and yeah, I had to do a lot of unraveling on that, and through loving the deepest parts of me and going on that journey, started to unravel and heal this disconnect. Yeah, if you saw me 15 years ago, you just wouldn't recognize me. I used to travel the length and breadth of England, going to football matches, home and away. I would drink 12 pints of lager in an afternoon, and I'd drink the boys under the table. I was like, I somebody said I looked like a truck driver in one of my pictures. Didn't even look like a woman. Like, it's unbelievable when I look back now, and I was just like one of the lads, and that's how I saw myself. And it was all just this desperate approval for male attention at the end of the day, because I was still trying to be daddy's little girl, and it was playing out in all kinds of unconscious ways. Um,
Wow.
yeah, so that's been a big journey.
Wow. Thank
Mm,
you for sharing that.
mm,
Mm, and again, self-worth has been a major piece for me. Still
mm,
layers and levels of that still. But that's kind of like the core, and similar abusive relationships and so on and so forth. And again, that impinges upon every
mm,
level of my existence, every
mm.
level. So, and so interesting to hear what you were saying. I mean, it's hard to imagine you as that, but just wow, look. But it's just great to hear you say, like, that's what it was. And even though maybe you look successful on some level from the outside in terms of money and status and all of that, um, that fitting in a certain way to what the world expects, there was such a deep level of
Mm.
inner unfulfillment and disconnect. It feels quite
Yeah.
sad to feel into it, actually, to tap into that. um,
Mm,
and the numbness that you also experienced. Yeah, so
mm,
walking your talk. um,
mm.
Walking your talk, I think. Sorry, I've just tapped into that former you now.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like, if I can move through that shit, anyone can move through it. It's just like having the right guidance and the right support and the right tools to not have to go the long way around like I did, and I'm sure you did as well. On some parts of your journey, it's like there's some ways where, I look back and I think, God, if I'd had a mentor at this age, I could have just chopped 10 years off that that pain. um
Yeah.
but yeah, but then I
And
do
then,
believe we go through it to be able to help and inspire others, and we learn the lessons and the gifts that are in there. So
yeah.
mm,
Um, Yeah, but it's interesting. Again, I've had the same thought. If only I'd had like that person, you know. So yeah, but at the same time, wouldn't be who I am. You wouldn't be who you are.
Exactly.
Able to hold space and be what we are now without that. So thank
Mm.
you. I'm going to begin to wrap things up, but there's so I've got this one question from somebody that put in, so I almost forgot to ask you her question. I am going to ask her question, and if there's time, we'll see how we go. I've also got one more question about men and the masculine, because
Mm.
we've talked all about the feminine. I think it would be great to just bring the masculine in.
Mm.
But let me just ask this question. So this is from somebody in my group. So, and it's a lot, so you don't have to answer the whole thing, but do you have tools for a single woman to help her explore her sexuality, release shame? Well, we've talked about that a little bit, and increase Kundalini, practices to do alone, and enhance support future relationships. I mean, this is like your whole life's work and mine. So maybe just like give one or two nuggets here. I think this would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would recommend doing a daily embodiment practice, whether that's dancing or moving your body with your eyes closed or doing a shaking practice, something like this where you're connecting into your own body on the regular, like small bite size every day. Doing 10 minutes a day rather than doing a big practice at the weekend would be much more supportive over the long run, because you're really making that daily connection. So that's something very simple and practical I would recommend. And then also, I think we've already touched on like making friends with your yoni. So it doesn't mean that you need to do internal work every day, because if we kind of put that out there as an intention, it's going to make it feel like a chore sooner or later, and the last thing we want to do is make pleasure feel like a chore. But if you can do something every day to connect into your sensual energy, so whether that's just cupping your hand on your heart and the other hand over your vulva and just sending unconditional love, like first thing in the morning, last thing at night, that's a really lovely practice to do. Or whether it's doing breast massage as well, because that opens your heart chakra, and it's nourishing, and it makes you feel connected to your sensuality in a different way. Or whether it's actually doing some internal work and just starting to explore and see what you can feel, but just doing something every day to connect in with your body and to notice what's there will be really, really supportive. Yeah, and keep it fun and playful is also really important. And I think it's so important that we become our own best lovers and not wait for someone else to give us pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful segue into the masculine part, you know, because again, there can be this belief, oh, I need a man to have the pleasure that I'm longing for. So yeah, how would you answer that and talk about the relationship with the masculine and men?
Yeah, I think it's really important that we continue to nourish ourselves and resource ourselves in our own pleasure, because that means then that we are with a partner, we've got more to bring to the table naturally, and we're more tuned into our feelings, and we're more able to enjoy the experience in general and be able to feel more subtleties and more pleasure. So there's that. And then what I'd also say is it's also super helpful to look at our relationship to our own inner masculine. And I really believe we're 50-50, that we've got both, and giving all our power away and feeling like a man has to do all these things for us or support us is disempowering, and can lead to leaky feminine energy or unhealthy dynamics. So the more we can look at like how can we bring our own inner masculine into our own lives and celebrate, that can be really beneficial. And that can just be having some structure in your life, whether that's meditating at a certain time every day, or putting your self-care in your Google Calendar and letting your masculine structure that so it feels like it's involved, or looking at the relationship that you've had with prominent men in your life, so whether it's past lovers, brother, father, whatever, and looking at what are their common themes, the common traits, positive and negative, will give you very very fruitful exploration as to what your own inner masculine's like.
Yeah.
Can be really powerful. Yeah, and just to I also believe like we can't surrender until we feel safe. So it's really important that we trust our own instincts when we're dating for the first time or we're with someone. the more embodied we are and the more we're able to trust our own body responses and instincts, then we're not going to get our boundaries overridden. We're going to be able to trust our responses and to be able to lean into, well, is this a hell yes? Do I want to be with this person or not? And often with clients, what if they're in relationship, I find that sometimes when we work together, there'll be a period where they're having less sex than they thought they would because they're starting to tune into what their hell yes is, and they're not going to engage in it unless it is a hell yes. And getting that clear is a really important step. So yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
I love what you said there about safety and creating
Mm,
that for ourselves.
mm,
Because again, I think that's such a key message to convey. And again, from personal experience, for so many years, I was putting the responsibility for my well-being
mm.
outside.
Yeah.
Oh, but you didn't do this. I told
Mm,
you that, but you didn't do that. Making the other responsible for my well-being rather than taking sovereign, holding myself
mm,
and taking full responsibility for my yes, my no, what was right, what was wrong. So really seeing that as a theme that was part of the programming. I think that's quite a common thing. So
mm.
mm.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot there. But yeah, it's beautiful because when we have that divine union in ourselves and things are harmonious, then when we're relating with the masculine, it's not coming from a needy place, it's coming from a very pure, heart-centered, truthful place, and that's much better. Yeah. Mm,
Yes. So
yeah.
Mangala, I've got a final question for you.
Mm,
As this beautiful, juicy, empowered woman, and how do you find? I'm making assumptions here that you're heterosexual. Actually, I haven't actually
mhm.
checked in with you, but how do you find men respond to you now in this, different beingness that you are?
That's a good question. um, I see there's two kind of camps. So like, and I've just moved back to the UK, so I'm actively on Bumble and Hinge, and partly because I just want to meet interesting men, whether it's for dating or to have as friendship.
Yeah.
I want to have good men in my life, and I had a huge community of good men in my life in Australia. So that's like rebuilding that here, and I find like I'm pretty upfront about my work once I get to know somebody. It's not something I'll put out there immediately until I can feel into them a bit more, and sometimes it comes with a lot of projection, like if they and that can be the unwanted sexual attention, which doesn't happen as much these days because my boundaries are strong as fuck. So there's like it doesn't even come into my field mostly. But often, well, not often, sometimes men can be intimidated by them, by just a woman being in her full um, feminine glory, and that's okay. Those guys are not my guys. On the other hand, there's plenty of men that I've interacted with who absolutely revel in a woman being fully expressed and in touch with her sensuality, and it brings out so much in them. It lights them up in a really beautiful way, um, and I think that that's something really, really lovely, and they're the kind of men I want to hang out with and have in my life. And they're not afraid of, like, my last lover in Melbourne, this is personal information. My last lover in Melbourne was 10 years younger than me, and he was just, in fact, he messaged me today and said, you taught me so much. And I'm like, well, it was just this beautiful, I wasn't in teacher role. I was in receiver receiver mode, and we just had this really beautiful reciprocal relationship that was really special and really honoring. And there are some amazing men out there who, like, a good man will want to see a woman in her full pleasure, because that's the most enlivening thing. That's the biggest turn on. It's not what somebody looks like, it's not whether the bum looks big, it's none of the superficial stuff, it's not whether she's got wrinkles or anything else, or a flat tummy or any of that other crap. It's is she enjoying the heck out of this?
Yeah,
That's what it's all about.
absolutely. Yeah, such a gift.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, yummy. So Mangala, how can people reach you if they, I will post stuff underneath wherever I post this recording. I'll put how to reach you anyway, but just tell us, what are you offering? How can women reach you?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, which is mangalaholland.com, and on there I have a free 3-part video series called From Shutdown to Sensual Satisfaction. So that's a juicy thing that you can hop on and grab. I'd also say follow me on Facebook on my personal profile, because I'm pretty damn active on there, which I'm sure you'll post the link for. I am on Instagram, but I don't use it as much. So I'm mostly on Facebook. That's probably the best way to find me. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Super juicy.
Oh, so thank you everyone for watching. Please share, please like, spread the juiciness with everyone. The world needs more juiciness and love right now. Oh.